Good morning, everyone. It is my great pleasure to welcome all of you today for yet another insightful session. Our speaker for today is Vyakta Sivali Ahirwar. She's an alumnus of our very own institute and has cleared both GATE and NET with a JRF. We are glad to have you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay, so shall we wait for some people or can we begin? It's 11:30 already.
Ma'am, we can begin. They
Okay.
will join soon, I think.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. I'm Vyakta, and I will be taking the class for Dalit literature today. And the reason why I chose this topic is because it was not very important in the previous year questions. If you see it, you cannot find a lot of questions regarding it. But since the last 2 years, the numbers of questions have increased, and in the last year, I think there were three questions each in each shift. So for a topic that is very small, we can easily cover it and score 6 marks. So that's why I thought that we can choose this topic. It is very important in even other papers as well. I think I can see 2 or 3 questions in GATE papers, and even the recently conducted Rajasthan paper that happened, assistant professor, there were a lot of questions. And I have included the questions as well. So we will practice the questions. As you can see, there have been a lot of questions. So we'll practice them. But first, I'll begin with an introduction of what is Dalit literature. Now, can you see the slide? Is the slide visible to you?
Yes,
Someone
ma'am,
will
it is
have.
visible.
Okay. And now, have all of you studied the African literature? I would like somebody to answer.
Ma'am, we had one session on African literature, but we have not studied it as a part of our curriculum.
Okay, so like, what is this? What in what semester are you guys? Is it different for everybody?
Ma'am, it is different for everybody. We have some from first, second, and also fourth year. So,
Okay, so I think I will try to be I would try to explain more so that everybody can grasp it. Now, if you've ever studied African literature, you know and you understand that African literature was not highlighted by the mainstream British literature or American literature, and only recently it has gained significance. So is the case with Dalit literature. Now, Dalit literature, it refers to the writings by Dalit authors that tell about the lived experiences of oppression, resistance, and aspiration with the context of caste discrimination in India. Now, each one of us is aware of the fact that caste discrimination is still rampant, even though untouchability is abolished under Article 17. But the notion of caste and the identity related to it is still very important in today's society. So, Dalit literature is the literature by the oppressed people, by the people who were considered as subaltern. Now, do anybody know who are the subalterns or who has written the work? Can the subaltern speak?
the work was written by Gayatri Spivak,
Okay, good, very
and
good.
subaltern is, as far as I know, it is basically someone who has been marginalized or exploited.
Okay, very well. It's a good explanation. And as Pramiti has said, subaltern are the people who have been marginalized. So Dalit literature is a part of the marginal literatures. Some other literature that can also be considered marginal are queer literature or the tribal or and the Adivasi literatures, and even African literature for that matter comes under marginal literatures, because these people or these groups were at the margins of the society, at the periphery, at the borders of the society. But recently they have gained their voice. They are trying to explain themselves, and the most famous way that is used by Dalit writers is the mode of autobiography, because through the mode of autobiography they can talk about their pains and their experiences. Now, if we go back to the history of the word Dalit, it is a very new term, and it was first used by Mahatma Jyotiba Phule in 19th century. Now, Jyotiba Phule was a social reformer. His wife Savitribai Phule is also called as the first teacher. They used to run a school for the downtrodden. and he used the word in context of the oppression that was faced by the untouchables. Now untouchables are a part of the social stratification that exists in the society. Now there are four varnas: the Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya and the Shudra, and the untouchables fall below the Shudras, so they were not allowed to be a part of the mainstream society. So that is for those people, for the untouchables, Mahatma Jyotiba Phule and his wife would run a school. Now another word is also used for Dalits, which was Harijan, and it was coined by Mahatma Gandhi. However, it is not in use these days. The word Dalit literature, it was first used in the Dalit Conference of Maharashtra Dalit Sahitya Sangh and Dalit Satyagraha Sangh, sorry. And you can see that the Dalit literature gained prominence in the 1950s after a lot of social movements happened. And Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who's called as the father of Indian Constitution, who was the chairman of the drafting committee of constitution. He is also called as the father of Dalit literature because of his works and the Ambedkarite movement that happened thereafter. So we can see at the key themes in Dalit literature. First would be the caste-based oppression. Now I've told you that caste is a prominent factor that will feature in all of the works that we'll study. I'll talk about the major authors that have written in Dalit literature, and the themes of untouchability or discrimination and social exclusion and marginalization from society is a key theme that you can see in all of these works. Second is resistance and empowerment. Now I've told you that the Dalit people have tried to assert their identity, have tried to talk about their rights. So that is also a theme. We can also see themes such as trauma and memory, because the experiences of untouchability is a very painful experience. So there is a lot of trauma in the stories, and there is a description of the collective suffering that they had to suffer. Now we can also talk about intersectionality. Does anybody know what intersectionality is, and who has given the term intersectionality? Who coined the term? That has been asked in the net. Anybody? Any guesses? I guess no. So I'll talk about it. Intersectionality was a term given by Kimberly Crenshaw. Now she has used this term in the context of African women, about how African women are doubly oppressed. African women have been oppressed by the mainstream feminist movement as well as by the patriarchal forces. So the theme of intersectionality can also be applied when it comes to Dalit women, because Dalit women have also been at the receiving end of oppression from both the patriarchy, and they have also been excluded from the mainstream feminist movement, which was also called as which was mostly Savarn feminist movement. Now the fifth theme would be social reform and education, because these people were at the margins and they were underprivileged. So the education level in these people was not so much. So the influence of Ambedkarite thought can be seen in them, where the works try to urge the readers to agitate, educate, and unite. That's the slogan coined by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Moving on to the next slide. Yes. What are some of the critical concepts when it comes to Dalit studies? Now it becomes a part of the subaltern studies. As Pramati has already said, that Spivak talks about subalterns. So Dalit also form the group in the subaltern literature. So this comes under the ambit of subaltern studies. I've talked about intersectionality, and when it comes to intersectionality in Dalit literature, there's a very famous essay by Gopal Guru. It is a part of a major university syllabus. I don't think so we have it in Barkatullah University, but Gopal Guru's essay about how Dalit women talk differently, which was written in 1995 and I think was published in New York Public Journal, talks about the intersectionality of Dalit women and how Dalit women need to talk differently to raise their issues. And a follow-up essay was written by Sharmila Reje, and I have covered Sharmila Reje in the following slides as well, because she's a major Dalit scholar and she talks about the Dalit issues. Even though she comes from an upper caste society, she has very well experienced and captured the plight of Dalit women, and she has written a follow-up essay in response to Gopal Guru's essay, which is a critique of difference and towards a Dalit feminist standpoint position. She is a sociologist, and she talks about how Dalit women need to take a different feminist standpoint. Another concept is the annihilation of caste. Now, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, in his seminal work, Annihilation of Caste, talks about how we need to dismantle the structures of caste and the patriarchy that happens. And if once the caste is destroyed, the society would become more egalitarian. So, annihilation of caste is a major theme that you can see in all of the works that we'll see. And autobiography as protest. Now, personal narratives as resilience, as a way to reclaim identity. Dalit scholars and Dalit writers have used it time and time again so as to share their lived experience. Now we'll move on to the next slide. Is everything clear? Does anybody have any doubt up until now? You can write in the chat box also. I guess no. Now moving on to the Dalit movements. There was some social consciousness that was arised by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, and the Dalit movements that have happened are a result of that, are a consequence of that. And the movements that were happening to eradicate the caste-based discrimination that was prevalent at the time. And it was to uplift the marginalized communities, and we can still see remnants of caste-based discrimination today. If you read the newspaper, you can see that caste-based discrimination still exists. Now, the earliest efforts that were done were by the 20th century philosophers and scholars, Jyotirao Phule and Savitribai Phule. I've talked about them previously, so let's not repeat the facts. That happened was the Dalit Panthers movement. I think I did not include the name of the scholars, but I'll talk about them. It was started in 1972 by three very famous scholars. It was Raja Dhale, J.V. Pawar, and the third name I'm forgetting, yes, Arjun Dangle. So these are the three very important writers, and you have to remember the names of all of them. This is the most popular question that you can see reoccurring everywhere, is the three founders of the Dalit Panthers movement. Now, this movement was inspired by the Black Panthers movement, which happened in the US. There were also certain other social movements that happened. Was the temple entry agitation, such as in Kerala, because Dalits were not allowed to enter into the temple premises or use the public water or the shared public spaces or religious spaces as well. So we can see that there were a lot of movements happening. Simultaneously, there was a lot of literature being written. There was autobiographies were being written, memoirs, and Dalit fiction was being written, and all of that becomes important from the part of our NET syllabus. Now, the other movement that is famous is the Navyana Buddhism. Ambedkar, with his followers, converted to Buddhism, and he left the religion, and that became a very key theme in some of the works about the influence of Buddha and his philosophy. Moving on to the next slide. Let's discuss some of the major Dalit critics that have written about the Dalit literature, or have criticized, or have at least talked about them. First one would be Gail Ombek. Now, she is not from India. She came to India to pursue her PhD dissertation, and she stayed here because she was very much moved by Ambedkar's struggle and his social movement. So she has written a lot of works about Ambedkar. I've only included two of them, but it is my humble request to each and every one of you that if you'll Google a little bit, I'll share my notes as well as the PDF I have of the book. It would suffice, but I would really urge that it is the duty of everybody that they will go back home and they will Google all of the authors that I'm talking about, so that you are familiar with the faces, you're familiar with the Wikipedia pages of the people so that it is easier for one to remember, because just studying would not suffice. You should always do the research of your own. So let's talk about Gail Ombed. She's one of the foremost scholars who has contributed to the understanding of Dalit rights in the context of broader social justice. Her book Caste in Indian Politics talk about the paramount role the caste factor plays in Indian politics, and how all of our political rallies and everything is related to caste. Second of a very important book is Understanding Caste from Buddha to Ambedkar and Beyond. And she talks about the journey of Buddhism, how Ambedkar coined this new term called as Navayana Buddhism, and how it has shaped and how the current shape that it has taken. The second scholar is Sharmila Raje. She is also known for her Dalit feminism works. She has devised an intersectional standpoint through which we can study Dalit works. Her very famous book, Writing Caste, Writing Gender, Narrating Dalit Women's Testimonies, is quite famous. And I think everybody should give it a read so that it gives you more of a perspective about the Dalit women's movement and how to look at Dalit literature. Her second very famous work is The Politics of Identity, a review of the Dalit movement in India. And I've just covered the few important works. You should all Google, there are other important works, and these are the most famous works. Third one is Kancha Ilayya. Two of his famous works are I Am Not a Hindu and Post Hindu India. He is also very famous. Now, there are other scholars who are sociologists or anthropologists. I've not included them, but there are scholars such as Pratap Bhanu Mehta, who still writes for the Indian Express newspaper, or Rajni Kothari, and other scholars who work on caste from a sociological standpoint. They are not so much important from the literature perspective, but you never know what NET might ask. So let me change the slide. Now I've come to the major Dalit writers. Now I've only covered the prominent ones. First one, who is also called as the father of Dalit literature, is Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. He was given the very big honor of being awarded the Bharat Ratna, which is the highest civilian honor in 1990. One thing I would like to mention is that whenever you're studying for from a NET perspective or any competitive exam for that matter, please focus on the factual details of it. For example, who was given the Bharat Ratna, or who was given the Pulitzer Prize, or who won the recently awarded Pulitzer Prize, or who is winning the Nobel Prize. Can anybody tell me who won the Nobel Prize in English Literature in 2024? I would like an answer. Yes, Sonal, you may answer.
Ma'am, it's a Korean writer named Han Kang. She won the Nobel Prize for the literature for her work called Vegetarian, Non-Vegetarian. I'm confused on the title, but yes.
Yes, very good. See, Sonal knows, and I think everybody should know who is winning the recent prize. And I think a day before yesterday, even the Sahitya Akademi Awards were announced. So what you can do as a good practice is, once the Sahitya Akademi Awards are released, you can make a short note in your notebook about who has won the major prize, what are the other major works of the author. For example, Margaret Atwood is a Canadian author who has won several prizes, and she keeps on winning. So Margaret Atwood is anyhow important from the NET perspective. She's a Canadian author. She's authored very famous books such as The Handmaid's Tale and The Testaments, and she's one book of The Testaments, and she recently won the Booker in, I think, 2019 or 20, something like that. So it's a good practice to keep an eye on the major awardee winners, right? So coming back to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, he was posthumously awarded the Bharat Ratna, and he has authored a lot of books on caste, social justice, and economics. And now I've only been able to fit very few works into my slides, but his collective speeches and writings have been collected by the Maharashtra government, and it is available in the public domain. So if anybody wants to read it, they can read it. And they can even see that the voluminous length of Ambedkar's writing show his intellectual depth as a thinker. Let's and even one of the questions in net exams that we'll see later on, they have asked you to arrange them in a chronological sequence. That's why I've mentioned the dates, but it's very difficult to remember the dates. But what you can do is the questions that have been asked previously, you can remember the dates for those authors, for those particular authors. If from Dalit literature, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's works have been asked in a chronological manner, you can, of course, learn them in a chronological manner, or at least the works that lie in the starting phase, the works, a few works in the middle and the few works in the last. So at least that way you just have to arrange it. Nobody is going to ask you the exact years. So Annihilation of Caste is one of the most famous works that talk about caste and how we need to annihilate it, and to for a society to become more egalitarian, it is crucial to annihilate the concept of caste, because caste is a social construct. Just like gender, caste is also a social construct. Now let's move on to the second work, Riddles in Hinduism. He talks about the religion, his problem with Hinduism, and how the untouchables or the Shudras are not a part or not an integral part of Hinduism. His third work is Who Were the Shudras. It was released in published in 1946. Now even you can do these tricks, that Annihilation of Caste was published in 1936, and 10 years later the Who Were the Shudras was published, which was in 1946. Then The Untouchables, Who Were They and Why They Became Untouchables, was released in 1948, and it is a sequence, or it is in continuation to the book Who Were the Shudras. So it was published 2 years later, 46, 48. That is also a trick that we can use to learn the dates, right? The last book that I would like to talk about is The Problem of the Rupee, its origin and solution. Now it talks about rupee. Why would I include it? Because this is the foundational book that has helped in the establishment of RBI, the Reserve Bank of India, and we do owe it to Ambedkar, because RBI is a major government institution and we should know the origin of it. So the problem of rupee has influenced in the functioning of RBI. Now let's move on to Babu Rao Bagul. I think I've forgotten to include when was he born. Please, you can do search it. I also don't remember. One of his famous works is Jeva Mi Jaat Chorli Hoti, When I Hit My Caste. Now what happens is the Dalit writers were not educated in English. So you can see that we can divide Dalit literature into two segments. First is the Marathi Dalit Sahitya, and second would be the Tamil Dalit Sahitya. But this classification is incomplete, and that is why I have not mentioned it, because you can see a lot of writers now writing in English or Punjabi or Kannada. So, but most of the writers that come from are from Maharashtra, because that is where Ambedkar converted to Buddhism. So that is the place. Maharashtra is the state where Dalit consciousness is at its peak. So one of his famous work is When I Hit My Caste. Death is getting cheaper, and one important fact that I forgot to mention that we should all focus is the people who have translated the works. I have tried to incorporate a few names into the slides, but you should also do your own homework. Now, When I Hit My Caste is translated by Jerry Pinto. Jerry Pinto is a very famous author himself, and he has done a lot of translations as well. Translators should be memorized anyway, which ways, even for other works that are written in native languages. For example, Gitanjali Shree's book, Ret Ki Samadhi, or The Tomb of Sands, was translated by, I think, Daisy, and that was also a question. There was a question related to Gitanjali Shree in one of the NET exams. So the recent events that are in news and the people that are in news, that who has translated what, the major awards, should be kept in mind, and you should always have a separate notebook for this. Now moving on to the next author. Yes, it's not the first author, but I think I've done the numbering wrong. Now, another very important author, he's also a Marathi writer, is Sharan Kumar Limbale. Now, his autobiography, Akkar Mashri or The Outcast is a very famous work. He talks about his experiences of being an outcast and what his family had to suffer through, and it is a very important work that talks about caste oppression and the social discrimination one has to face. He has also written a very famous anthology, sort of towards an aesthetics of Dalit literature, which was translated by Alok Mukherjee. Now, please remember the translator's name because they are very important and they are asked in every exam. One anthology that I don't think so I've mentioned in the slide but is important is the anthology compiled by Eleanor Zelliot and Mulkraj Anand. Mulkraj Anand is the author of the book Untouchable. Yes, and they have written a very famous anthology that is also important. Let's move on to the second author, which is Arjun Dangle. He has also written an anthology which is called as The Poisoned Bread. And in this anthology, a lot of famous Dalit authors have contributed. Now it is your work that all of you will try to look up the anthology and which authors have contributed in this. Moving on to the next work, it is The Black Coat. I know it's very difficult to memorize so many works of so many authors, be it British or Dalit or Indian or the diasporic literature. But if you've revised enough number of times, it becomes easier to memorize. So try to read this PPT at least 3 or 4 times before the NET exam and make notes of it, or you can get it printed as well, so that if you memorize it enough, you will be able to remember these key concepts, these writers, what works have they written. Also, try to remember if it is a poetry collection, if it is a prose collection, or if they are short stories, or if it is a novel. And if it is a novel, whether it is a graphic narrative or whether it is a post colonial narrative, something about the book, at least the first line that is written in Wikipedia should be memorized, because that is where the questions are being asked from. The examiner also does not take a lot of efforts in framing the questions. So please keep that in mind. Moving on to the next author, Namdev Dhasal. I've talked about him. He was associated to the Dalit Panther movement, right? And no, he was not associated. I'm very sorry. His famous work is Golpitha. It is a poetry collection. Now, he has written beautiful poetry that narrates the caste discrimination and the his own life. Other works such as A Current of Blood, Akrosh Ka Kuras. I've talked about translations, and Dilip Chitre, he has translated works of Namdev Dhasal into English under the title Namdev Dhasal, Poet of the Underworld. Dilip Chitra has also translated a lot of other works. You can Google about him. Moving on to a very famous work that I think some of you must be aware if you've studied for quite a bit of time, and he comes, even if you study the normal Indian literature, you can find Om Prakash Valmiki's mention, and his work is Vyakta Sivali Ahirwar. Okay, so I lost. There's no electricity at my house. You will have to give me 5 minutes to move to a location where you guys can see me. I'll be back in 2 minutes. Is that okay with you guys?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Please
Sure.
take
Yes,
your time.
ma'am. Sorry. Hello. Um, can you guys hear me? Let me share the PPT.
Yes, ma'am, you
Yes,
are
ma'am.
audible.
Thank God. I think just the electricity went off and I was not really prepared. I will start the presentation. Okay, so we are back. I think we covered. Yes, so let's start from Sharan Kumar Limbale. We were at Om Prakash Valmiki. Juthan is a very famous work that talks about how Dalit people were supposed to eat or like were forced to eat the juthan or the bits and pieces left after the people are done eating. So he talks about his autobiography. He talks about his own life, uh, how he was forced to eat the jutun of other people. He has also written a very famous poetry collection called as Sadyo Ka Santab. Another famous collection is Bas Bahut Ho Chuka, and Dalit Sahitya Ka Saundarya Shastra, which are his essays on Dalit aesthetics, is also a very famous work. And I think I've seen a few questions about this work as well. Let's move on to the next. And why mm, has the slide changed for you guys? Share this tab instead. Yes. Yes, I think now Narendra Jadhav, he was the vice chancellor of Pune University, and he's one of the people who have accomplished a lot. And he has written three autobiographies. Now a person cannot write even one, but he has been able to do the task of writing three autobiographies. First one is Amcha Bap An Amhi, and now my pronunciations in Marathi are extremely incorrect, so please pardon me with that. One of his most famous autobiography, that is Outcast, was published in 2002, and it talks about his identity as a Dalit, and he talks about how he has lived in the rural spaces as well as the urban spaces, and how that amalgamation has given rise to more of a cosmopolitan identity. It's a beautiful book. Everybody should give it a read. His third autobiography is called as The Untouchables, and all of these depict the struggle of for human dignity by a Dalit family. Moving on to the next author, who is Perumal Murugan. He's also quite famous. His most three most famous work that I think are quite popular are Punatri or The Story of a Black Goat. And Pyre is a very recent, I think it was published in either 2016 or 18, and it's a very recent work. And the works by Perumal Murugan are always in the news for their insightful commentaries, and also they are very much controversial. So Parimal Murugan is one Dalit writer that you can see quite a bit in the news. Also, I have not written from which state he belongs, but that is also good practice. If you're studying an author, try to look at what is his ethnicity, and if you're looking at regional literatures, try to look what is the language, what is the regional or vernacular languages these people write in, because these are also the questions that are usually asked. His other famous works would be Kazi Mugam, Pokuzi Pyre. It was translated by Anirudhan Vasudevan. And one of his work, yes, One Part Women, won the Sahitya Akademi's translation prize. That also becomes very important from an exam point of view. And can anybody tell me who has written? There's a book called as The Edible Woman by a famous author. Does anybody know who has written that? I
Margaret Atwood.
Yes, very good. It was Atwood indeed. Now in 2000, let's come back to Perumal. He in 2023, which is a very latest work, his novel Firebird has won the very prestigious JCB prize. So it becomes important because it was only last year that his novel won the prize. So let's move on to Devanur Mahadeva. Now he is a Kannada language writer. He was also given the Padma Shri in 2011. Also important from an exam point of view. He has written a lot of works which I cannot pronounce, so I will be skipping them. You can read them, of course. one of his famous work that you should remember is he has written about the RSS, the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. Uh, yes. Now, coming to the key Dalit women writers, there was a question asked when the key Dalit women writers in the NET exam that got cancelled. There was a question about arranging them in a chronological order. We'll see that question later on. So you need to understand that Dalit women writers are being asked again and again. Even you can see these questions and match the following type questions. So what's important is that you remember when were these authors born, what is which language do they write in, what are their famous works, right? We'll cover Bama Faustina Souza. She was a Tamil Dalit feminist teacher, and she had converted to Christianity. So she talks about her life experiences as a Dalit Christian, right? And her very famous work Karuku is an autobiographical work. Her works revolve around the themes of caste, gender, and Christian hypocrisy. So you can see there are quite a common themes and motives in all of these works. So if there's ever a question which is very conceptual based and you identify the writer as a Dalit writer, and in the options there is does this work revolve around caste or identity? So you should always guess that yes, it does revolve around caste, because if it is a Dalit writer, they would be talking about caste and untouchability and social discrimination, the stigma around it. So that is a way of making an educated guess in the examination hall, which we called as tukka, but like of course make an educated guess. Some of our other famous works are Sangati, Oru Tattu Katha, Vanmam, and an accomplishment is that one of her accomplishment is that most of her works have been translated in English and French, right? Moving on to Urmila Pawar. She is an Indian writer and an activist, and all of her works are written in the Marathi language. Even by the name, that we can understand that she must be a Marathi language writer. Her short stories, Kavach and A Childhood Tale, are very famous. Her autobiography is Aidan Weave. Now, this was written in Marathi originally, but it has been translated into English under the title The Weave of My Life by Maya Pandit, right? And that's also good practice to remember if somebody has written a foreword or an introduction, that can also be asked. So Vandana Sonalkar has written the foreword for this novel, autobiography. The third author that I'd like to cover is Shantabai Kamble. Right. Now we are running short of time, so I'll try to wrap it up so that we can discuss a few of the questions. Now, Shantabai Kamble is a Marathi writer again. She wrote the first female autobiography. Now, this becomes a very important fact, right? For example, who is the father of Dalit literature? Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who has written the first female Dalit autobiography. It is Shantabai Kamble. And it is trivia like these that exams usually focus on. And her autobiography's title is The Kaleidoscopic Story of My Life. And it was published as a complete book in 1986. Moving on to Baby Kamble, she has written The Prisons We Broke. In that also we can find the same themes of caste oppression and the experiences of a Dalit woman who lives in a colonial and post-colonial India. Right, let's look at Gogu Shyamla. She was a Telugu language writer. Now, we've seen Tamil writers, we've seen Marathi writers, but she is the first Telugu language writer that I've covered in the PPT. And she is also a women's activist and a very prominent Dalit writer. And she was born in 1969. Her the first two works are her fiction works. Father may be an elephant and mother only a small basket. But now it's not an incomplete title. That's the entire title, and you will have to read the book to find out why it is an incomplete title, right? Second is the Tataki Wins Again and Braveheart Badea. She has also written she's written a non-fiction work as well, Gender Consciousness in Dalit Women's Literature. Gender Pratifalanu. I'm not sure what is it. Let's move on to the next. We've come to Meena Kandasamy. Now, if you look at Meena Kandasamy, once Google her, she's a very young woman. She does not live in India as of now, but her works and her poetry are so moving that you will be forced to read one after the other. And two of her very famous works are Miss Militancy and Touch. And The Gypsy Goddess is a novel that is also very famous. When I Hit You, or A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Wife, is also a famous novel. Now, one another fact that you should keep in mind is the similar titles that you will come across. You can find those PDFs anywhere. That what are the certain similar titles, that is a portrait of an artist as a young man is also a very famous work, right? A portrait of the writer as a young wife we've seen in this, which is by Meena Kandasamy. So try to look for these facts and trivia. Exquisite Cadavers, it's a very recent work. Also, when you're learning any author, try to look at the most recent works of that author and the most famous or the most prominent works, and that will be more than sufficient, because we cannot learn all the works. Let's move on to Daya Pawar. Her autobiographical work is Baluta. One other work is Kondawa, The Cattle Shed and the Veranda. Mimi Mondal has written luminescent threads, connections to Octavia Butler. Yes, now let's move on to an interesting topic, which is the graphic novels. Now, in NET or in any exam, you can see that there are a lot of questions being asked from the graphic novels, because it is quite an interesting topic, and it these are beautiful novels to read. If anybody is into art and literature, I think graphic novels are the way to go. And people try to stereotype Dalit literature into just autobiographies, but it is so much more than that. We have graphic novels, and the two very famous graphic novels that are very beautiful, and you can easily find the PDF on the net, is Bhimayana and A Gardener in the Wasteland. Now, A Gardener in the Wasteland, it has the visual aesthetics by Aparijita Ninan, and the story is written by Sri Vidya Natarajan, and it narrates the reading of Jyoti Rao Phule's Gulamgiri. I've talked about Jyoti Rao Phule and Savitri Rao Phule in the previous slides. So this work is a narration of his story, right? The witty and insightful attack on Brahminical hegemony is increasingly relevant, and a great argument for reading the original revolutionaries, right? Moving on to the next work, which is Bhimayana. It has been illustrated by Durgabai and Subhash Vyam. I think they are from Madhya Pradesh, if I'm not wrong. You might have to search on it. And she recently won a prize also, maybe. And the illustrations are inspired from the Dignat. Now, a direct question has not been asked as such, but if you can find certain information, like it is illustrated by Durgabai Vyam and Subhash Vyam, and it incorporates the Gnat, which belongs to Gond community, it is always better. And it is based on the life of Ambedkar, and it has been written by Natarajan with S. Anand, right? And it talks about the brutal injustice in denial of three life necessities to lower caste people: the water, shelter, and travel. These three necessities were not given to the lower caste people. Right, let's move on to the next questions. Right, finally, we've come to the end of my presentation, and let's now discuss certain question. And I will be asking you the questions, and you guys have to answer me, because most of these questions I have discussed in the lecture. So look at question number 68. These were in the 2024 June exam, right? And first question is, which of the following is not a Dalit narrative written by Perumal Murugan? Tirukkural, Poonachi, One Part Woman, Pyre. Who can answer? Like, unmute yourself and answer straight away. There's no issue. Someone will have to take a guess. I will not be telling the answers until someone takes a guess. Has anybody raised the hand? I cannot see. Yes, please unmute yourself, Juveri, and answer.
As per my guess, it is Tirukkural.
Very good. It is the right answer.
I am not
And
sure.
no, you're right. Very good. We keep, like, I don't expect you to get the correct answer because you've just heard these names, but it is a good guess and it is the right answer. Let's move on to the next slide. Yes, you can see it, I guess. Slide show. Yes. Who among the following women writers wrote the first female Dalit autobiography? Now, we just discussed this. Who is going to answer? Yes, Sonal.
Ma'am, is the answer third one, Shantabai Kamble?
Yes, very good. It is Shantabai Kamble indeed. Now, moving on to the third question. Akkar Mashi, The Outcast, is an autobiography of which one of the following Dalit writers? What is the answer to this? Is it Anand Tel Tumbre or Sharan Kumar Limbale? Let's narrow it down because Baby Kamble is a woman writer and we did not read it in her autobiographies. So, out of two and three, who has written The Outcast? Anybody?
Ma'am, Sharan Kumar
Sharan
Limbale.
Yes, it is Sharan Kumar
Kumar
Limbale.
Bale.
Very good. Now match the list one with list two. This was also in last year papers. Now we have not read about Lal Singh Dil or Urmila Pawar. We have read about Urmila Pawar, but we have not read about Tulsi Ram and Devanur Mahadeva. But we can make a guess that Urmila Pawar used to write in Marathi. So B has to be four. This we are sure of. And there are only two options that have B as four option, right? So it is either one or three. So if you're not very sure, you can go with one or three. But let's think about it a little more. Even if I've not told you the last other three options, Lal Singh Dil. Now, if I was to take an educated guess, Singh must be Punjabi, and it is indeed Punjabi. So
Yes, ma'am, Punjabi.
yes, so it is Lal Singh Dil writes in Punjabi, Urmila Pawar writes in Marathi, and Tulsi Ram writes in Hindi, and Devanur Mahadeva writes in Kannada. Now, Dr. Tulsi Ram was a professor at VHU. He studied at VHU, and he was also at JNU. And his autobiographies are published in two volumes. First is Murda Hayya, and other is Manikarnika, the movie that starred Kangana Ranaut, but that's not the same. It's just they have the similar names, right? Moving on to the next question, the 114 question. Which of the following works are graphic narratives? Now we have just seen a graphic narrative. Which one is that? Which one can you identify from these novels is a graphic narrative, is a Dalit graphic narrative?
Bhimyan.
Ma'am, I
Very
think
good.
Bhimyana by
Yes.
Bhimayan,
Srividya.
yes, ma'am.
Yes, so we know that B is a graphic narrative, right? And even if you've not read, for example, Dalit literature, we can still try to narrow down the options. I'll tell you how. We know that A Fine Balance by Rohinton Mystery is a novel and it is not a graphical narratives. So you can easily eliminate 3 and 4. So we'll again be left with BCE or ABC. So we know for sure that B is Bhimayan is a graphical narrative. So is Munnu, A Boy from Kashmir by Malik Sajad. Now I'll tell you the answer, but anybody wants to take a guess which of this is a graphic narrative, one or two? Like which is the correct option?
Ma'am, is it the second one?
Yes, yes, it is the second one. And this side, that side, Restoring Partition by Vishnu Jyoti Ghosh is also a graphic narrative. It is based on the partition literature. If somebody covers it, I think you will remember it and you can tell the person if they'd miss it that this is a very famous work, right? And it has been asked also. Let's move on to the next slide quickly. Now, arrange the following works of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in the correct chronological order. I also don't remember the dates. You can check it. And I think the correct answer is B, but no, it's the correct answer is 3CBDADE. You can remember the dates. I also got this question incorrect when I was attempting the paper, and it happens. So it's not really necessary for us to get all of the questions correct, right? To crack JRF, we need 100 questions. So we need 60 from here, or 40 from there, 70 from here. So if the few questions are incorrect, it is not that big of a deal. But you guys should remember the chronological order. I did not remember it at the time. Let's move on to the next question. Right. Now, okay, so I marked the correct answer, but we'll see. Now, one part women, the correct answer is A3, right? So Perumal Murugan has written the one part women. We talked about Perumal Murugan. We also discussed the Edible Women by Margaret Atwood. So everybody should remember. Now, Hansda Sovendra Shekhar, I've not discussed him. I am also not aware what he has written, but out of the options, I can say that Adivasi will not dance is by him. Baby Kamble has written The Prisons We Broke, and Urmila Pawar has written The Weave of My Life, right? Weave Aidan, we know. Now, Jutan by Om Prakash Valmiki is an autobiography. It's an easy question, and so is this one, right? Now, we have uh, learned about touch. It is by Meena Kandasamy. She's a poet, right? So even if you know one correct match the option, you could have easily narrowed down the option, right? D is one, is only in two of the options, and third is the correct one. If you study more, you'll understand that the Feast of Youth has been written by Harendranath Chattopadhyay. Hunger is by Jayant Mahapatra. Writer's Workshop is by P. Lal, and Touch is written by Meena Kandasamy. Let's move on to the next slide. Yes, now these are the questions that were asked in the NET exam that was cancelled, right? So let's look at these questions. You will not be able to easily find the paper, and there were three questions in this shift also. Okay, so this is my paper, and here also the answers are marked. But Dalit Panthers movement was influenced by the Black Panthers movement. Yes, I did cover it. Now, was it founded by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar? No, it was not, right? Who was it founded by? Raja Dhale, Namdev Dasal, and J.V. Pawar. So this option is correct. So that makes it A, C, and E. Third is the correct one. Same is the case with 117 also. I've marked the correct answer here also. So uh, I've talked about annihilation of caste, and it was an undelivered speech. Yes, this I did not cover. It was an undelivered speech that he was supposed to speak at some conference, Jat Pat, which conference I don't remember the exact name, but he could not deliver it, so he published it as a book, right? Now I've talked about that he wants to take a society, create a society where individuals are treated with dignity and respect. So A and B is the correct option, right? Moving on to the next slide. Hopefully the answers are not there. Yes. Now this is a very difficult question in my when I tried to do it, and I did not mark it as the I did not mark the correct answer, but now we can try to solve it. Now, what is the correct chronological sequence of the following Dalit women writers? Now, you don't even have to remember the birth years of all the writers that are talked about. Even if you've seen the pictures of all of them, now you will see that Meena Kandasamy is a very young author. She's very young compared to all of the other authors. Some of them are no more, and some of them are very old. Some of them are 69, Urmila Pawar, Kumud Pavre, Bama, all of them are very old. So Meena Kandasamy should be the last in chronology. And if you see, there's only one option, B option, where Meena Kandasamy is the last option. So that is also how you can guess it, or you can learn the years as well, whatever. Now, these are the questions that were asked in the RPSC assistant professor exam. There were quite a few questions. Now, these questions you can do because I've not marked them. Let's see who can match the columns. I will give you 30 seconds. If all of you have a pen, you can see, like, we have studied at least three of the authors. Anna Bhav Sate I have not covered, but others we have covered. Does anybody know what's the correct answer? Anyone, any guesses also? Any guesses are also fine. I'll help you in one way. Chalo. Yes, let me narrow down it down for you. Urmila Pawar has written The Weave of My Life. See, Aidan. So D is definitely two. And there is only one option where D is two. So it is the first option is correct. So let's move on to the next question. The title of Siddha Linga's autobiography is. Can anybody answer this question? Because I've covered three of these autobiographies and I've not covered Siddhalingayya's autobiography. So if you were to guess which of the works, I'll tell you that fifth is not the answer. Of course, we are attempting the question. So which is the correct option?
Ma'am, third.
Anyone?
Second.
Okay, second is correct. The Prisons We Broke is by Baby Kamble and Uru Keri is by Siddhalingaya, hai na? Baluta, if I'm not sure, is by Daya Pawar. You will have to check, but I think it's not the correct answer. Uru Keri is by Siddhalingaya. Now let's talk about 76th question. An anthology of Dalit literature has been edited by. I talked about this briefly. This was, however, not in my presentation, so that's why I've included it as a question. I mentioned it briefly. I don't know how many of you have joined till now. The anthology of Dalit literature has been edited by whom? Annabhav Sate, Mulk Raj Anand, Arjun Dangle, and Elinor Elliot. Any guesses? You can say the wrong answer. There's no issues.
Ma'am, maybe the third one, B and D.
Yes, very good. It is
Okay.
indeed BND, Mulk Raj Anand and Eleanor Elliot. They have both written an anthology. While I was covering a few other anthologies, I did mention it. Very good. You guys are paying attention in the class. That's nice. This was also in my slide. Let's see who all remember. Towards an Aesthetic of Dalit Literature, Controversies and Consideration is a translation of the Marathi book. Uh, who is the translator? Sharan Kumar Limbale, the author himself, Baby Kondeba Kamble, Manju Balu, or Alok Mukherjee? Who is going to give the correct answer? Anybody can give the correct answer by unmuting themselves.
I guess it's Alok Mukherjee.
Yes, very good. It is Alok Mukherjee. Let's move on to the next question. In his Outcast, Jadhav constructs a particular version of Dalit identity. How can this version be described? Was it Dalit awareness, the metropolitan Dalit identity, Dalit spatial identity, or the cosmopolitan Dalit identity?
Ma'am, is the answer fourth one?
Yes, very good. Let's move on to the next question. You're on the right track, Pramiti. Very good. Who established the Dalit Panthers in 1972? This, at least two people should give the right answer. You can write in the chat box. I am able to see the chat as well. You just have to write one, two, three, or four. Like, don't write the entire names. We are anyhow. We have exceeded the time limit. I think 12:30. I was supposed to finish. I'll take just 5 minutes of your time. See, very good, Nidhi. See, Vijaya, very good. Everybody should write three. Three is the correct answer, but everybody should write so that you remember that three is the correct answer. It is Namdev Dhasal, Arjun Dangle, and J.V. Pawar, and they're very important, extremely important. Read all their works, and you will just need to spend 2 or 3 hours at the max in the literature after what I've taught you, and you will, I am quite sure that you all will get the questions correctly. Now, on what basis can you conclude that Outcast by Narendra Jadhav is a Dalit text? Now, I also am not very sure about why the answer, like the answer is should be the social status of the writer or character representation, and RPSC marked it as character representation. So we'll consider that answer as correct only, right? Now, the work Golpita by Namdev Dhasal is. Let's hear the answers. What, according to you, is it? Is it, are they a short stories collection? Is it a poem collection? Or is it a novel or short essays? Now you can unmute yourself and answer. Quick, quick, we don't have enough time. Someone has to answer.
A collection of poems.
Very good. It is indeed a collection of poems. Now we've come to almost the end slides. These are a few questions that were asked in the GATE exam. I will help you in this question. because we've not studied the other works. But can you now, the presents we broke is by Baby Kai Kamble, and it was in Marathi, right? So B has to be in three, right? And B is three is only A and C option. Now you guys can guess which option should it be. Is it either A or is it C?
Ma'am, A.
Yes, it is indeed A. Let me check. 48. Yes, it is A. I didn't want to tell you the wrong answers. It is A. Right. Now, which of these is not an autobiography? This everybody should answer, right? We've talked about Baby Kamble, the presents we broke, right? We've just discussed. So it is indeed an autobiography. So let's remove this. Now, out of the left three, which of the following is not an autobiography?
Is it Karuku by Bama?
No, no, that is also an autobiography. So we're left with only two options now. Mulkraj
Ma'am,
Anand, Untouchable.
untouchable.
Yes, Untouchable. This will be in your this will be in your curriculum as well. It was in our master's syllabus, I guess. It talks about a single day in the life of a character called as Bakha, and there are very few novels that take part only in a single day. There is Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, and um, I think To the Lighthouse also happens in just one day or a period of 2 3 months, I'm not sure, but this is a very important detail that it happens only within a span of 24 hours, right? The entire novel is just about the 24 hours in the life of our protagonist Bakha. Moving on to the next question. Now in gate exam you can see a little bit questions that are tricky, more analytical and difficult. So let's read both the assertions P and Q and think about the if both are contradictory assertions, as in they are opposite to each other, or they're compatible assertions, or they cannot be read in relation to each other, and or Q is the only explanation of P, right? Dalit narratives tend to be read single dimensionally as evoking the reader's pity at the protagonist's caste humiliation. I think that is correct, right? Now, as telling the story of heroic protest against discrimination or as a description of the protagonist's rise from misery to triumph. True, true. There is a tendency to keep the other in the space of difference as perpetually exotic. Now, the concept of other and it is a little bit, I'll have to go into the details, but they are always kept at the margins. So, anybody would like to take a guess as to what is the correct answer? Are they compatible or they contradictory assertions? Are they similar in nature? If they are similar in nature, they'll be compatible. Anybody would like to take a guess? You can take a wrong guess. There's no issues. It's a difficult question.
Ma'am, is the answer A?
No, they are not contradictory, but thank you for answering. They are compatible assertions in the sense that both of them talk about the same things. That the Dalit narratives, they talk about caste discrimination and everything, and in the Dalit narratives, there is a tendency to keep the other in the space of difference. That is, the people who are Dalit, they are kept as the other, right? They're treated as someone else. So they are both compatible arguments. And I think that is, oh, I have one more question for you guys. You can match the authors in the first column with their respective translators. Now, I think I covered this. Namdeo Dhasal, who has translated works of Namdeo Dhasal out of the three? I think you can come at the right answer if you just answer that one question, because only Namdeo Dhasal is a Dalit writer as of now. Or is related to which one? A, B, or C? Can someone answer? Or even if you know the other options, you can also come at an answer that way either. So I'll remove Kamla Das. Let's remove Kamla Das. Kamla Das. Correct option is Madhavi Kutti. Now, can someone answer? I think I've even given
Ma'am,
the
is
answer,
C
right?
the correct answer?
Yes, yes. It Namdev Dasal is related to Dilip Chitre. So no. B, C, C is the correct answer. Answer. You said C, right?
Yes.
Yes, very good, Pramati. You do well, and I think we've come to the end of the presentation. Yes. So now, if any of you have any doubts, you can ask them, and then we'll close the session. Are there any doubts, or if you want to ask something, I'll share the PPT's link once
Ma'am, I
class
had
is
a
done.
question. Like
Yes,
in the
Pramati.
PYQs, there was a statement that the Dalits are always the exotic other, like something like this. So, matlab, I could not understand it why they are the exotic other. I mean, they are a part of the society, even though discriminated.
Yes, I can talk about this because the Dalit people were originally, if we talk about in context of other the tribal communities or the aboriginal, so Dalits were also treated as the exotic. Even tribals, for that matter, were treated not as a part or not as an integral part of the society usually, right? But now after the constitution, I think things have drastically improved, and all of us know that. Now at present they are not treated as the exotic, but there was a time when they were treated as exotic, and I'll be happy to help you. Thank you for having me. It was a great opportunity, and it was wonderful talking to you all. Thank you for everybody who participated. That's one of the key things that should be taken in account when we're trying to prepare for any competitive exam, is that we are trying to attempt more number of questions, right? Focus your attention less on the learning part, more on solving MCQs, because that is the only thing that is going to help you. That's why I included a lot of MCQs in my preparation, because uh, if you've studied, it does not matter. If you're able to deliver that knowledge into the exam, that is what will count at the end of the day. So prepare a lot of MCQs, right? Try to do all of the past year questions that you can handle, right? And good luck to all of you. Thank you so much.
Now, I would like to call Javeria Asif for the vote of thanks.
Okay, so good afternoon, ma'am, and good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of everyone present here, I'd like to extend my heartfelt thanks to you, ma'am, Ms. Vyakta Sivali Ahirwar, for your enlightening session on Dalit literature. Your deep insights and the passionate delivery have literally broadened our understanding, which was literally a new topic, especially for first year students. So it has broadened our understanding and inspired us to explore this field further. Also, I hope that we would carry out this richness and this study further, and your ability to highlight the richness and the depth of Dalit literature has truly resonated with us. Thank you so much for your guidance, for your expertise, and for being such an inspiring person. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm also quite happy that all of us could interact today. Um, yes. Thank you so much. All the best. If you have any doubts, you can come to me, right?